In this video I'm going to show you how to make Rollers drum and bass like BOU.
Wanna step to me, then be my guest. It's a one artist, we're not fearless. Can't take me down, I'm a self-fortress. They get negative and live you in a darkness.
Now this track is now released. It's called Daily Express and it's a collab with an artist called KJUNTO. I'll leave a link if you want to go stream it, add it to your playlist. Now we're going to use a mixture of samples from my Rollers DnB pack and then using Serum 2 as well for some of the basses. But first, let's look at the inspiration behind this track. So the inspiration behind this song is from a track called Wicked and Dark and it's by artists BOU and K9. And the reason we use this track as reference is because we wanted to go for a really heavy and dark track. So the intro to this track is really heavy and really atmospherically vibey, and then the vocals are really dark and heavy as well, and then the drop is kind of like filthy in a way but still bouncy at the same time. The track is in D minor and we're going to be at 174 BPM. So the track is going to start with a 16-bar intro, and this is where we just introduce everything, set the scene. Then we're going to move into an 8-bar breakdown, and this is where we start to switch things up. Tension starts to come into the track, and then another 8 bars later we go into the full build-up. Everything's going crazy, tension is building up massively, and then we go into the drop, and obviously we bring in our basses, our main drums, and then finally we go into the second part of the drop, which is 16 bars again. But this is going to be slightly different because we're going to bring elements from the intro back into the drop to then nicely transition into the second half of the track. And then all this is going to get duplicated to create a full track. So let's start with the drums. So in the intro, we've got this really cool break sample that I use pretty much throughout. And then right at the end of the 16 bars, we've got this little snare fill to transition nicely into the breakdown. And then in the breakdown, we introduce some tension with a kick drum, and then we add a clap, but this clap has got a lot of reverb on it. And then we add hats and perks in the background to add a bit of swing and groove. And then we add a crash that goes with the kick drum to add more tension. And then this crosses over into the build-up, and pretty much all the elements stay the same. We remove the clap, but everything else is still present, but everything just happens a bit more frequently. So the kick, for example, is playing more frequently and more frequently the closer it gets to the drop. And then just before the drop, all the drums will cut out for 1 bar before. Then we get into the first 16 bars of the drop, and we've got a kick drum playing, the clap playing without any reverb on, and then all the hats and perks as well playing in the background, adding lots of swing and groove to the track. And then at the end of the drop section, we do some transition elements with some breaks and some reverse crashes. So reverse crashes just sort of like create like a riser sound. Then in the second part of the drop, everything stays the same. We just add tops on top of it. So we add more swing and groove with hi-hats and perks. And I like to use samples for this. So I'll show you this inside the door. And if you pick the right ones, it just adds even more groove and keeps the track moving and keeps it interesting for the next 16 bars. Then everything of course repeats itself pretty much. So as you can see here, the intro, which is 16 bars long, we've just got a break sample. Now this break sample was from a free pack, I believe. I'll leave a link to that in the description if you want to download it. And it's just a loop, and we've put it in to 174 BPM, and it's just got an EQ on it, so you can see the EQ on it down here, and this EQ is being automated, so it's just automated on here to slowly gradually go up and bring more of the sound out in the higher frequencies. So let's just have a listen. And as it gets closer to here, it's that simple. And then that just brings up energy as it progresses, keeps it moving. And then at the end of the section, we've just got this little snare roll. So the breaks cut out. And then for 1 beat here, we've just got this snare roll that sounds like this. I believe this was from Splice, but the name's all messed up because it's bugged out. And that just leads nicely into the breakdown. So now we have the breakdown here, which is 8 bars long. And what it is here, so firstly we have Rollers kick number 8 playing, and this is just playing 4 times. So every 2 bars, sounds like this. And then we have this clap, which has a lot of reverb on it, just slapped onto the channel. So you can see Valhalla Room, and then we can automate this off, and it's just EQ'd a bit as well, just to sound like that. So we have the kick, and that just fills up loads of space. This is Rollers clap 1, and then we've just got Rollers hat 1 coming in every single beat. And then a supporting hat happening in between each bar, which is just Rollers hat 13. It sounds like this. And then we've got More stuff going on down here. So we've got a snare that hits every single beat, and this is Rollers snare 1. And this forms part of like the build up. And then we've just got a crash that hits every 4 bars as well. So Rollers crash 2, it sounds like this. And then further down, we've also got some swing elements. So we've got some percussion swing, and this is from a different sample pack. Shout out to Inverse Audio. I know a lot of the viewers here will watch them as well. KJUNTO will have added this in. And it's just a swingy perk element happening in between each beat. And all of this is basically repeated for the full 8 bars, as you can see. And then if we move across to the build-up, you'll see a lot of the elements stop, and the kick drum starts hitting more frequently. So twice every beat. And then 4 times every beat after 4 bars. And then it goes right over and crosses over into the drop as well. Because we didn't think a gap for 1 bar was necessary for the kick. We thought it went nicely into it by including that. One other thing to note is that this kick drum is also automated. So look at this automation in the EQ down here. It's gradually being EQ'd to make it less aggressive just before it hits the drop. So cutting out some of these low ends means when the kick drum hits again with more low end in it, the drop just hits harder. And then it goes back to normal on the drop. Then the snare just continues. So the snare, the crash. I added a hi-hat loop, so hi-hat loop 1 instead of the other hi-hats, just to create a bit of variation. And then those swingy percussion continue as well. So now we move on to the drop, and I've just highlighted the first 2 bars because it's basically just duplicated after that. So we've got the same Rollers kick 8 hitting on the beat and halfway across the 3rd beat. And then we've got the same clap, Rollers clap 1, coming in and hitting on the 2nd beat and 4th beat. Very simple. And then the same hats as well as before. One of them is hitting every single beat and one's hitting halfway across the bar. And then further down, we've got these swing elements that come back in, but they don't come in as often. They just come in here and here. And that's just because it works with the certain basses in the drop, which we'll go over later. So overall, it sounds like this. And that creates a nice groove in itself as well. So then you can see the whole 16 bars basically, apart from the end bit, it's all just duplicated. And then in this last bit, we just have a bit of variation before it goes into the second part of the drop, which is just that reverse crash that I mentioned, and then just a different way of doing the drums, and then some automation on them as well on the EQ, and then a bit of reverb on that clap again that comes back in, mixed with a breaks sample as well. So altogether it sounds like this. And then in the second section of the drop, I mentioned that we added some top loops. So we just found these on Splice and in my sample pack. So the first one sounds like this, and we've basically just put an EQ on it here. You can see cutting out some of the harsh frequencies that we didn't want in our track, and then making sure some of the lows and mids on in there as well. So it sounds like that. And then we also added a drum loop from the jump up pack in. That sounds like this. So both of them together. It's just adding a load of groove in, and then all together with all the drums, the same drums as the rest of them. And it also keeps the track moving and keeps it interesting, because after 16 bars, your ears kind of need something new to listen to. And then you can see we basically just copy and paste everything, maybe with some slight variation, and then we get a full track. Now it's time to look at the basses. So we only have basses on the first 16 bars of the drop. And for this, we're going to be following the ABAC method. And I've put ×2 there because A is 2 bars, B is 2 bars, A is 2 bars, C is 2 bars, and then it repeats itself to get to that full 16 bars. So for this, we're going to be using sounds on Serum 2 or samples that we find. And then we're just going to do a lot of post-processing on these sounds to get them sound really aggressive. And we're going to be looking for like dark sounds, so like 808 basses, respaces, and then any other heavy stab basses we can create. So this is what the basses sound like on their own. So we've got a stab bass, then it goes to a wobble bass, then to another stab bass, then back to the first stab bass, and then the respace at the end. And then we've got a sub bass underneath these, adding the depth. Now it's a little bit messy, but basically the sub just follows the notes that all these basses are playing. then we just got that little siren in there as well to add a nice layer to the respace. So what I'll do is just go through each element. So let's start with the stab bass right at the start here. So this one. So you can see the melody it's playing along the bottom here, D, D sharp, D, D sharp, F. And this looks like this along the bottom. So it's actually from the Future Jump Up stab. And this track was made so long ago that we're using Serum on here. So this is the bass here. You can see it's just the basic shapes and a default. And on these settings, and then the effects tabs just looks like this. It's quite a simple one. And then this is just on the coarse pitch. I think is on like 19%. When you drag it on here, just press Shift Alt click and it moves it to one side, and then just put it to like 19. You should get a pretty similar sound. Don't think it's got too much post-processing on. It's just on the bass bus we're cutting out the low end because we're going to put that sub underneath it later. And it's got this reverb on, but I'm not sure that's doing anything. No, barely anything. And then next we have this sound, which is like a filthy wobble. So this is playing like this, and we've layered it. So the first layer sounds like this, just 3Ds playing, and it looks something like this. So another Serum preset, main Frogger. And then there's actually quite a lot going on the effects tab. You can just have a look at that if you want to copy it. Don't know if this is on anything on the effects tab. Yeah, it's on the hyper. But yeah, this monster on -3 is causing that. And then we just layered it a little bit with this, but it does make quite a big difference. You can hear that. Nice bit to the mids and the highs. And this is actually from the Future Jumper pack as well. Frog number 7 just looks something like this. Sounds a bit stupid on its own, but in the track it sounds good. And then this was like a massive project between me and KJUNTO. So we were like going back and forward, trying to create all these really interesting sounds. So that's why it's a little bit messy. And this is actually 3 layers, this one. So the melody this one's playing here, you can see D, D sharp, C. Very simple melodies. It's all about the sound design. And this first bass sounds like this. Like a gritty low-end bass. Oh, this is a Midnight preset. Shout out to Midnight. I've got some gritty ones in my packs as well. And then this bass here is... Oh, they're all from Midnight. I don't want to show his presets. If you want to grab them, then you can as well. And that one sounds like this. And then this one sounds like this. This is in just a brass one, I think. And then all together you create that unique new sound. So feel free to experiment with layering. We've done it quite well in this one. And then finally we get the respace at the end, which is playing C sharp to C. And this is just one of my favorite ones, the Jump Up Res, All You Got, which is actually BOU inspired. So it fit perfectly in this track. And this just looks something like this. With some bass fanner on as well, and some Camel Crusher. Now this is following the A-B-A-C format. So this first section is A, the first 2 bars, then this section is B, and then this is A again with a slight variation though. Here you can see that note there, and then this is C when the respace comes in. So then all this is then repeated, this section over here, so we get the full 16 bars. And the only difference is I don't have the respace here because then it goes into that transition period, so we didn't need the respace here. So then the sub underneath doesn't have to be this messy normally, it just needed to be for this tune because there was so much different stuff going on. That sub at the start is just a preset from an Enai pack on Splice. Just sounds like that. And then we've got all these sub basses underneath, which are all the same sub bass, just slightly different EQs and stuff on them. There's sub basses like this in all my sample packs. Some really low-end heavy ones. This is the Future Jump Up sub here. Just really love these kind of subs. It's drawn on here if you want to copy it. Now, if you're enjoying my style of production here, and you want to take your production further, but you feel a bit stuck, then maybe my Music Production Academy is for you. If you want more information on this, there's a link down below in the description. Just click that. There's loads of info on what you'll learn, loads of reviews as well, so you can judge if it's a good fit for you. And if it is, hopefully I'll see you inside. Now it's time to look at the vocals. So we were lucky enough to find a really full vocal sample that we could actually use pretty much throughout the entire track. So for the first 8 bars, we introduce all the atmosphere, so we don't include the vocal there. And then we do this vocal riser 8 bars into the intro, and then introduce the vocals. And then we just found really good elements of the vocals throughout to be able to keep the vocals going throughout the breakdown, the build up, and the drop, and the second drop. And then for the next 8 bars of the next breakdown here, where it repeats itself, we just have a little bit of silence again with some like vocal background stuff. So like, I think we've got like laughing or a crowd in the background for that bit. And then after 8 bars, the vocal comes back in again and it just repeats itself. So we get a little bit of breathing between the tracks, so it's not just vocals throughout the entire track. And now I'm going to pass you over to KJUNTO, who's going to show you the vocals in full.
Hey, KJUNTO here. I'm going to quickly go over the vocals for Arknate in my latest single, Daily Express. I'm just going to go through the inspiration behind it, what kind of vocal processing we did, why we chose to omit or use it in some parts of the song, and just other production tips that I can give. We start off with this very dark instrumental. Has a piano and it's very chilling. Similar to a lot of other tracks that use artists, we want to be kind of in the same vein as like tracks that have Floda and Screwface or Ira in it. We knew that this tune was very dark and we had a lot of like sinister ambience like sirens and like vocal shouts and screams. We knew like a Rasta vocal that has like a deep formant pitch would be perfect for it. So we actually found this vocal and it sounds like this.
Wicked and bad like the one Fred West. Have me killer lyrics hid under me mattress.
Basically, we searched around the internet for 7 days or so collectively, and we were able to find this one. We found it on Splice. If you look far and wide enough, you'll find some gold nuggets in Splice. We wanted to keep everything the same. We ended up using the wet processing vocal. This vocal is by the Raga Twins, which is an iconic and famous duo. They know what they're doing with their vocal processing, so we didn't want to change too much of it. It's very similar to how kick drums and snares might be already over processed. You don't want to add too much more, otherwise it starts changing the way that the kick sounds, which will impact how it sounded when you selected it. So all we've done with these vocals is just add a limiter, and we've done it for every single one of them. And the only difference is in the buildup, we actually added the formant pitch down one with the original vocal to add kind of like this crazy tension to it, and it sounds like this.
Daily Express, Daily Express.
And then at the drop, we also just use the formant pitch down one because it really adds that impact of jump up. As soon as like we built up all that tension, it's released with this just dark, heavy hitting vocal. So that was the reason why we chose that. And then we've just layered it up with this like rhythmic ambient vocal chop. And then all together, when you hear the drop, you have this rhythmic, hard-hitting bass line with this heavy, heavy, dark vocal. It ends up being like very, very powerful in that regard.
Wanna step to me, then be my guest. It's a one artist, we're not fearless.
The other thing I want to go over quickly is after the first drop, we decided to take away the vocal. And there's a reason for that. This track is very vocal driven, and we didn't want our listeners to be tired of hearing the vocal over and over again. This is something where a lot of artists, where they have their main element being the driving factor of the entire song, they'll typically take it away so it's not overused, and by the time you get to the second drop, everyone's tired of hearing that element. So what we did was we wanted to let the track breathe a little bit, but if you just take away everything and just leave the instrumental, it sounds too empty. So I've actually layered it up with this laugh, and I think it pairs perfectly because it's a very wicked sounding song, and so with this sinister laugh layered up on it, it kind of just fits perfectly. So it sounds like this. And we wanted to be kind of a background element too, have it sit behind the sirens to kind of just add a little bit of that ambience to let everyone know like, hey, we're still going with this dark vibe. And the processing is really simple on this. It's just parallel processing, which has a reverb and a delay, and then some auto panning. Basically just to have it sit in the background and then have it fill up the space. That's pretty much everything that we've done for Daily Express. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please stream it.
Now let's look at how we did the instruments in the intro. We start with a piano, and this is playing the main chord progression. And then we've got lots of Atmos, so lots of Atmos stacked, all playing like D notes underneath, and this is creating all the atmosphere and tension. And then after 8 bars, we bring in a respace, because this is going to be supporting the vocal. But then as we go into the breakdown, it switches up slightly, so the respace stops. The piano plays a slightly different melody, and the Atmos continues, but then we introduce a little pull space, and then the main new melody with the horn. And this continues over in the build-up as well. So all these elements stays the same, maybe a slight variation in the horn. And then we hit the drop where nothing happens because the basses are now playing. And then when we get into the second half of the drop, we have all the elements from the intro. So the piano, the Atmos, the respace. We add a new string element over the top to add some variation. And this plays with all the drums to add that progression then into the next breakdown. First of all, let's look at the piano. So this is just a piano from Nexus, just a basic piano with some reverb on it. So you can see I've got the patch and then I've got a Valhalla room on it. And then it's creating a chord progression. So it's in D minor. So you can see it's playing multiple octaves. So it's playing D, F, A first. And then we go to F. You can see there. And then E, and then the last one is back down to D again, just with slightly different notes playing from that chord. You can see we've got a lower one down here where it's not there before. And then this is copied for 8 bars, so it just plays it twice. So this is the same as this. And then what we've done for the break and the build-up is because it changes and switches up and we add in more elements, we just copy the first chord and literally just copy and paste it across like this. So you can see for the next 8 bars, it's just like this. And that means it's basically just acting as like an Atmos now. So it doesn't disappear and sound thinner. It still sounds full, but then we can bring in our other elements. And then underneath all this, we've just got loads of Atmos playing basically just D notes continuously. And these are just from Nexus. So this one. Then we've got another. We just stack the layers to create more depth. This one as well. And then this one. So you can find these in loads of other, well, I'm sure Serum 2 will have quite a few now. Or you can just find them on Splice as well. So this one here is from Splice. Sounds pretty cool. And then all 5 of these stacked on top of each other just gives you more. Listen to that. Just sounds great. And then 3 of these continue into the break and 2 of them stop just to give more space for the 2 elements that come in. So the first is just another Nexus sound. So it's just a bass sound. And this is just playing this melody here. So it goes D and then it goes up an octave to this D and then back down again. And this sounds like this. Just adding tension. And then the main part, which is this Serum sound, this new sound that comes in, is a horn. So this is a horn from the Future Jumper pack again. This sounds like this. Got some reverb on it as well. I always do reverb separately because I just prefer Valhalla Room to the Serum one. This is playing this. Let's go and have a look. So just a D, and a D again, and then D sharp. Very simple. And then it goes down. And that one is a C sharp. So that's the break. And then in the last section, it does that again, but then it just plays 3 Ds and then stops before the drop here. So then on top of that, we have the respace that comes in. So in the first part here, if I just play it all, you'll hear there's like a siren, which we'll get onto. And that's filling up the space. But then when the vocal comes in, we put this respace in here. So this respace looks like this. So D, A sharp, G, D. And then when the vocal comes in, the siren stops and this plays over instead. So this. And we've EQ'd it as well. You can see just low end. And this is also from the Future Jumper pack. It's the sand respace, but there's loads in the other packs as well. If you just EQ it like that, a lot of the respaces will end up sounding the same. And then you can see it's just EQ'd out just before it goes into the breakdown, just to add a nice transition. So then what about later on? Do any of these elements come back in? So of course they're going to come back in the second section of the drop. It's all just duplicated. But on the drop itself, when we go into that other section, the next 16 bars here, we bring a lot of these instruments back, because we get rid of all the basses, so the instruments carry it instead with the vocal. So I'll just play it for you so you can hear it, and then I'll show you what they're doing.
When I feel less wicked and bad like they want Fred West. Have me killer lyrics hidden on me mattress. Only pull them out when me in a contest. Can't take me down on my self-portrait.
So essentially what we do is we bring a load of these Atmos back in, you can see, but we then bring in some new elements. So we bring this respace that was here in, because we need some low end really to go with the drums to keep it heavy, because it is the drop after all. And then we've just added some new elements over everything that's just playing a D, so we can add a new melody in. And this is just the sound from Splice, I believe. So it's just a nice string quartet by the sounds of it, playing a melody. And then we also added this in. And this. So all together you get. And then with the Atmos as well. And altogether it sounds really cool. So then all this stops and then everything just repeats itself. Now let's look at some of the effects. So it's very basic. In the intro, we've just got some impacts, and then we've got a siren playing throughout, and then we've got some rain in the background to add more depth to the track. Then we move over to the breakdown and we've got some sweeps, so risers, down filters, things like that. Then we've got more sirens, and we also introduce some alarms as well. And then the last part of the build up, we introduce a lot of risers, because that builds tension with like the kick drum playing as well. And then this will cut out a bar before the drop for the pre-drop to happen. And then in the drop, we'll just have risers and impacts every 8 or so bars. And then you can add like one-shot effects in if you need to fill in the gaps, but I don't think we did for this track, so we didn't. So there's 3 sections of the effects I'll show you. So this first section is like the transition area. So you can see we've just got down filters. So these are just from the Rollers pack. Impacts, risers between each section, so you see it along here, first 16 bars, impact at the start, risers at the end of the 16 bars. And then if I can, I always put an impact in the breakdown here, you see. And then this one as well. And then in the build up, we have more risers. So we normally stack a few risers on top of each other. So some from the Rollers pack and then some from Splice if I find one I like on Splice as well. So you hear this, just one of them, 2, 3, 4. So got a bit of tonality in there as well as white noise ones. And then in the drop, we just have these risers, the less loud ones, playing every 16 bars. And then at the drop end, we'll have like a down filter, maybe add in an impact if it needs it. It didn't need it there though. And then that all just repeats itself. So then the second and third section are unique effects. So the first unique sound we used was this siren in the intro that I talked about earlier. So this just happens for 8 bars and then it cuts out because the vocal comes in. But then we bring another siren in the breakdown and build up, but this is a lot quieter because the vocals are playing over the top. It sounds like this. And you can find loads of sirens on Splice. You can find them just typing in on Google like copyright free sounds, and you can download a load for free. And I believe there's some in some of my sample packs as well. And then we just put a drone underneath this from Splice just to support the sirens, just to give it even more depth. And then finally we added a rain underneath that as well to add even more depth. I always try and add some sort of white noise below in the intro, and there's loads of white noises in the Rollers pack. There's like fire crackles, wind, storms, loads of different stuff like that, which can add a lot of cool depth to the sound. Even if it's barely noticeable, it still sounds really good. It's better than not having anything. And then these don't come back in the drop, these ones. These are just unique to the intro. But then again, earlier we did have that siren come back in with the respace, but I think that's a different sample. And then the third element, the second unique sound we added in, was just in the breakdown and build up, and it's this siren sound. And I think this adds quite a lot, to be honest. So this is another sound from Splice, I believe. You can see it there. And this sounds like this. So if I was to play the track, full track, you can hear it quite obviously. It also complements that horn really well as well, so without it, it sounds a bit dull. It just feels like there's something missing, so that adds a really nice layer to the track, and this just plays right up until the drop. And there we go. That is the track complete. And I haven't gone through like Mixdown and Mastering this, but if you're confused about that, I've got loads of other videos on that. I'll leave a link down below to them so you can just watch them and get familiar with everything. But now let's listen to the final product, Daily Express.
Wicked and bad like they want. one Fred West. Have me killer lyrics it under me mattress. Only pull them out when me in a contest. Then me make sure all matters addressed. There's no make me go draft we we're in the treasure chest. Cause we're inside yes so merciless. Burial lyrics left man in a distress. You can read about it in the Daily Express. Daily Express, Daily Express. You can read about it in the Daily Express. Daily Express, Daily Express. You can read about it in the Daily Express. Wanna stick to me then be my guest. This a one artist, we no fearless. Can't take me down, I'm a self-fortress. They get negative and if you're in a darkness. Daily Express, Daily Express. You can read about it in the Daily Express. That's no make me go travel, we're in the treasure chest. Cause we're inside this so we no fearless. Wicked and bad like the one Fred West. Have me killer lyrics it under me mattress. Only pull them out when me in a contest. Can't take me down, I'm a self-fortress. Me bring the pain like a cum abscess. Try get to be no free access. Why you messing with me? You must be brainless. Left your pan tops cause you're feeling depressed.
And that is the video complete. Remember, this track is out. If you want to add it to your playlist, then there's a link down below, first link down below. If you haven't already grabbed the Rollers DnB pack, I recommend it to make music like this. And if you enjoyed this video, why not watch this video here where I take you through another Rollers DnB track and we make it step by step. And you can learn more about music production and how to get your track sounding really, really good.